All right, welcome back. We are going to get started by cleaning a much larger and much more realistic data set. This is the United Nations population estimates for every year since 1950, actually 1951. So go ahead and navigate to this site, which is linked in the PDF and also on the course website. And we're going to download data files. So click here on the download data files. And the options that you get, you see standard projections, population indicators. Go ahead and download the total population, both sexes. And that'll take a second to download. And while it does, go ahead and watch this next part of this video about using the Tableau data interpreter to clean your data.
Welcome to this data prep video. You can download the dataset to follow along in your own copy of Tableau. Here we have a report in Excel showing the number of resolved incidents per employee per month. Formatted reports like this aren't easy to do analysis on. The Ideal tab shows data formatted like a database table, or raw data. This is the format Tableau prefers for optimal analysis. However, there are several features in Tableau Desktop to help automatically reshape text in Excel files into this format for better analysis in Tableau. To begin, we'll connect to this Excel file. In Tableau Desktop, select Excel from the Connect pane. Navigate to the downloaded file and click to open. We'll drag out the Resolved Incidents sheet. Although Tableau can connect to this report, we see here in the preview that this isn't a great format. There are no column names, the headers from Excel have a lot of nulls, and so on. Here in the side panel, we see the option to use the data interpreter. Let's turn it on. Now we see that those headers and nulls have been stripped out and our columns are properly identified. We could go on, but if we want to get more specifics on what the data interpreter did, we can click Review Results. This will open an Excel file describing the changes. If we click to the tab we used, Resolved Incidents, we see which fields are being used as headers in red and which are considered data in green. Before we go back to Tableau and our data source, let's take one more look at that Ideal tab. Note that instead of having a column for each month with data underneath, in this format, there's a date column and each row contains the number of resolved incidents for a unique combination of date and employee. This data is taller with more rows rather than wider with more columns. Back in Tableau, we want to change the format from this column per month layout into a single date column and a single column for resolved incidents. To do this easily, we'll simply select all the date columns. Click on the first, scroll if necessary, and shift-click on the last. We'll open the menu and select Pivot. The Pivot feature essentially merges the information from the original columns and rows into two new columns, Pivot Field Names and Pivot Field Values. We can see that Pivot Field Names is actually our date, and Pivot Field Values can be renamed Resolved Incidents. We can double-click to rename. If we click on the icon here above the first column, we're brought to the metadata grid. This can be a useful view, as the vertical layout can be easier to navigate, especially if we have a large number of fields. It's also useful when tables have been joined or to see the original field names. For now, we'll go back to the standard view. Our data is almost where we want it to be, but there's one more thing we can do. Here, the employee field is actually two pieces of information, a location code, A, B, C, D, or E, followed by an employee number. We can split the column based on the shared delimiter of that hyphen. Click to open the menu and select Split. We'll use the metadata grid view and rename our split fields. Split 1 should be location, and split 2 should be employee ID. There's an ABC next to the date field, indicating that this column is considered a string. We know it's actually a date, though, so we can click on the ABC and select Date to update the data type. Now if we click onto Sheet 1, we'll see our nice tidy data ready for analysis. Let's bring Employee ID to the view and Resolved Incidents. When we sort, it's clear that there are really 2 groups of employees, some who resolve a much higher number of incidents than others, those who are Tier 2. If we add another data source, connecting to that same Excel file, we see that there's a sheet called Tiers. This report adds a -2 to the end of an employee ID if they're Tier 2. Because not all rows have this ending, a standard split won't work. However, we can use a custom split. Open the menu, choose Custom Split, and we can set our delimiter as a hyphen, and mandate that we want to break off all columns. This forces Tableau to break off that 3rd column with the Tier 2 indicator. Thank you for watching this data prep training video. We invite you to continue with the free training videos to learn more about using Tableau.
All right, welcome back. By now the dataset should have downloaded, and when you open it you should see this. And the first thing that you should note is that this data is not long and skinny. It is very wide and it is meant for human eyes, which is great if you want to read it with human eyes. But we want to read it with a computer import. We want to read it in Tableau. So let's clean it up. So first thing I'd like you to do is make a new tab of your Excel workbook and call it Cleaned Structure. So I'm going to go all the way over here to the far right-hand side. Click the plus sign over there, and then you'll have this blank sheet, and that'll be Sheet 1, and then you want to rename that to Cleaned or something along those lines. And you're going to copy over everything from the Estimates sheet into the Cleaned sheet. The way that you do that is you're going to click in the upper left-hand corner and then just do Control-C and paste everything there. Copy here of the Cleaned sheet, and we are going to go ahead and start working with it. The first thing that we want to do is we want to get rid of this header information. There's actually an easy way to do this in Tableau, but since it's easy, we'll just delete these rows now. So we'll delete the first 16 rows. Now our headers are in the first row. Excellent. Then we'll go ahead and delete this strange little picture here. Just click on it and hit delete. Now we notice that this one column has 3 or 4 different data types in it. We need to break those apart. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and add 3 columns to the right of this big column here. All right, so go ahead and insert 3 columns there, and those are very large, so we'll make them a little bit smaller. And what we have is we're going to break apart each one of these data types into these 3 columns. We'll call the first one region, the next one subregion, and the final one country or area. All right. And we notice that each of the continents have all of the countries that are underneath it organized. So before we do any reorganizing, we are going to go ahead here, and beside each country, we're going to write what continent it belongs to. So I'll start with Burundi, and I'll fill in Africa, and then I'll copy and drag Africa down to where Asia begins. Then we'll do the same here. And copy and drag Asia down to where Europe begins. We will continue to do the same for the rest of the continents. So go ahead and fill in the rest of the continents in this way. All right, so you should have filled out Oceania, Northern America, Latin America and the Caribbean, Europe, Asia, and Africa. Now we're going to do the same with the subregions. So we're going to take Eastern Africa and put it over here and pull it down to where Middle Africa begins. Paste it here, down to Northern Africa, and continue adding the subregions for all of the data in the table. When you get to South Central Asia, you'll notice that there's no countries underneath it, and rather there's Central Asia and Southern Asia. We are actually just going to use Central Asia and Southern Asia and not worry about South Central Asia at all. All right, and then once you've completed all of the subregions, we are going to go ahead and delete all of the records that are not going to be included in, that are not countries. Okay, so first we will delete the first 13 rows because these are regions that are not part of the taxonomy that we're currently using. So we're going to go ahead and delete those. We will delete Eastern Africa. And I'm going to command click on all of these that are bold-faced, which are quite a few, and then go ahead and delete them. So go through your sheet again and click on all of the continents or the subregions in order to delete those. All right, and once you've finished deleting all of those records, you should have just the countries remaining here. You'll notice that Northern America didn't have a subregion associated with it. We are actually going to go ahead and fill that in. So we're just going to copy that and paste it right there because the subregion of Northern America is identical to the region, Northern America. All right, so if we go back up here, we actually don't need to copy this data into our country or area. We could just rename it country or area and then remove this column completely. Excellent. One last thing, just because it's a little bit tidier, is that I'm going to copy these rows. I'm going to actually cut them, and then I'm going to paste them to the other side of country or area, just in order to keep the largest to smallest ordering here. The other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the index column and the variant. Is that true? Yes. Because these are relevant when we're downloading the data from the internet. However, they're not going to be relevant to our project in Tableau. We are only working with estimates and no other data type. The index, while unique, there's also unique country names over here, so it's redundant. And Tableau is going to re-index all of these records with a unique identifier as well. So we can go ahead and delete those two columns and complete. We have a pretty good looking data table that we can now import into Tableau and get to work doing the rest of the cleaning there. So go ahead and save this workbook and move over to Tableau. All right, so once we're over here in Tableau, we'll go ahead and connect to a Microsoft Excel file. And this will ask me where it is. I'll open that up, and it might take a second because it's pretty big. Once it loads, we want to use the cleaned sheet. We don't want to use any of these because obviously they are not in the format that we are looking for. All right, so we pull in our clean sheet, and this looks pretty good. This looks like what we are wanting to work with. So great, let's go over to our worksheet. I go over to my worksheet and I notice something really challenging. Let's say I wanted to make a visualization of population growth over years. What on earth would I do? Well, I have all of my individual years here in the measures section. So it thinks that every single year is its own variable. That's not exactly what we were looking for. So let's go back to our data source and deal with that. We remember that whenever we have data in our headers, we probably have a problem. And here, the fact that I can reference all of these as being called year means that I have data in my headers. So we are going to deal with this by pivoting the data table. And the way that we pivot is we'll select on the first one, and then we'll scroll all the way over, and we will shift click on the last one. So I've clicked on 1950, and I'm going to shift click on 2015. And this will highlight all of the years in my data table. Right? I'm going to right click anywhere up here, and I'm going to select pivot, because what we're doing is pivoting the data table. So whereas in the meal plan data set, we pivoted by hand by moving each record down one by one, there's no way that we could possibly do that here and have it come out right in the end. So we're going to have Tableau pivot for us. Computers are very good at doing things repetitive, whereas humans are not. So we've pivoted our data, and you see here that we have Africa, Eastern Africa, Burundi, the country code, the pivot field name, and the pivot field value. Well, our pivot field name should actually be called year. And our pivot field value should actually be called population. And remember, this was population in thousands. So I'm going to put in the header here that it's population in thousands. That is best practice for whenever your data is somehow calculated, and even dividing by 1,000 is a calculation. It might also be really helpful if we had a column that was just the raw population, not divided by 1,000. So I'm going to use this column here. I'm going to click here, and I'm going to say I want to create a calculated field. And I'm going to call my calculated field calc: population. This way I have a visual reminder to myself that this is a calculated field. That way, if I see something going haywire later on, I know that it was probably me, and I would go and check my calculations later on. Obviously, for what we're doing right now, that's not terribly important, but believe me, you want to have some sort of record of which fields you calculated and which fields you didn't. Okay, so we're going to take our population in thousands, and we're just going to multiply it by 1,000. Click Apply, and OK. And here we have our calculated field. That's the population, the raw number of the population. Okay, so now we're going to go back over here to year. And you'll see that year got read in as a text field. We actually want year to be numeric because it's very likely that we're going to want to perform operations on our field here. So go ahead and click on the ABC and then click on number whole. And what you'll see is it'll move to the other side and you'll get this hashtag to represent that it's a number up at the top. So this is looking pretty good so far. Let's go back over to our sheet 1 and see how it looks. Excellent. We come over here to our sheet 1 and we have a year dimension and a population measure. Fantastic. Let's now go ahead and make that graph of the global population change by year. So I'm going to drag my year to columns, and then I'm going to drag my population in thousands to my rows, and I see the population going up year by year. Note that this is the sum of the population in thousands. So this is the sum of the population of every country that reported their population for every year. I probably actually want this to be a line chart, and we will just go over here and tell it, hey, you should be a line chart, not a bar chart. Even though it looks like there are discrete values, they're actually continuous. Fantastic. Great job. That's exactly what we were expecting to do. Now, just for a sanity check, we've done one sanity check, but we want to do another. So let's go back to our data source, and make sure that what we tabulated here is the same as what's in our original data set. I'm going to look at the population of Burundi in 1950, and I'm going to write on a piece of scrap paper that it's 2,308.92. And I come back to my Excel file, and I go back to the original tab, not the one that I cleaned, and I'm going to go up and find Burundi. And I have Burundi in 1950 is 2,308.92. Fantastic. Those numbers match up, and I can trust that all of the transformations that I did were accurate, and I didn't miss a step or accidentally transpose some numbers along the way. Great. Quick word to the wise. So if you look a little bit more closely on the UN population website, you see the CSV format option. If we click on the CSV format option, we see that the CSV files below are meant for bulk processing and statistical softwares like R and Stata and Tableau. And of course, an organization like the United Nations publishes their population data in a format that's ready for computers to process. Ultimately, it is always very wise to check on the websites, especially of bigger organizations, if they have distributed the data in a way that's going to be easier, so you don't have to go through all those steps of data cleaning. However, I hope that going through all of those steps, you've learned a lot. For the second half of this tutorial, when we work on data joins, you do actually want to use these CSV formats. And I'll see you when we get there. Enjoy!